Oh my gosh, that feels so good. So big news to come out of Hawaii last week. The governor announced that masks are no longer required outdoors. You still have to wear them indoors, but at least outdoors you don't need them anymore. And of course my first reaction was, brother, we have to wear a mask. You ever been Waikiki, bruh? No one. And the day after that mask mandate was lifted, I expected everyone to not be wearing masks anymore. But to my surprise, actually, it seemed almost the same. Like most of the people were still wearing masks, at least the ones who I saw as I was walking to work and just in general around town. Now that may be different in other parts of the state, but I was actually quite surprised because I figure most people, they don't want to have to wear masks anymore, and I was expecting it to be basically mask free in Hawaii. And so that's kind of got me thinking maybe I should continue to wear masks. I'm not exactly sure. I'm still haven't decided yet. So in this video I want to talk about wearing masks in Hawaii and kind of all the things I'm thinking about as I'm deciding whether or not I want to continue to wear a mask, at least for the next week or so. Okay, first of all, I want to mention that I am, and I don't know how YouTube's kind of weird with that word, so I'm going to be gesturing, but you know what I mean, right? Although I'm pretty sure that their smart algorithm can figure out exactly what I'm doing. And the second thing is, I'm not here to tell people really what to do. I mean, I think every person has that choice, and that's what I'm liking about this whole thing is now it's a choice. It's not mandated anymore. The first thing that caught my attention was how quickly this announcement came. I remember in the beginning, we would get like a press conference from the governor like every other day or almost every day on just updates and what was kind of going on. But then it kind of stopped for a while, and all of a sudden this press conference came up and this announcement was made. But I was quite surprised that it happened immediately. I thought maybe they might wait until after Memorial Day weekend, but with the number of people that have been coming to Hawaii, I think it would have been really hard to enforce that. But I'm really glad that they announced a hard deadline, like after this date, no more masks outside. I mean, they still have masks indoors, but still, the outdoor one was, I think, the biggest deal because of where we are and how hot it can get. Because it felt like for a long time, especially for Oahu, we were on this 2-week leash. Like we never knew exactly when or what was gonna happen after 2 weeks, what was gonna change and what wasn't gonna change, and the tiers. It was kind of a lot of stress and anxiety. I can imagine for the businesses especially, they didn't know what rules they'd be playing by, but for your normal person, it was kind of hard to deal with. And so I'm glad that this mask mandate was very clearly communicated. Everybody now knows the rules, it's very clear, and we can all move forward. The second thing is that this mask mandate is kind of a touchy subject. I mean, I remember in the beginning, people were really vigilant about it and making sure that people were following the rules. I remember we were in Waikiki earlier in the year, and as we were there walking around, I'd say about 30% of the people didn't have masks on, and that was a mix between tourists and locals. So it's not just the tourists who weren't wearing masks. And I can imagine as a tourist though, you come to Hawaii, a place that has this mask rule, and where you're from, it probably doesn't have that anymore. And so it must be really confusing and hard to do. On top of that, of course, Hawaii is super hot and humid. And I mean, I never liked really wearing a mask because it was very uncomfortable. For people who aren't used to this humidity, it must have been really hard. Again, that's not really an excuse, it's just, it probably was pretty hard. And the biggest thing about this announcement to me that makes a big difference in Hawaii is the fact that now there's no ill feelings towards other people. Like, I know that it was getting to the point where locals were kind of like stink eyeing like the tourists or other locals who weren't wearing the mask because, you know, they're wearing a mask, why can't you just wear a mask? It's not that difficult. But now that that rule is gone, there's no like expectation. There's no like, you should be doing this. There's no sense of like judgment or any of that. And now if you choose to wear a mask, you can, but you don't have to. Now, one of the things that I am thinking about is whether this, I guess, attitude is gonna like swing the other way towards the people who actually decide that they want to wear a mask. So before you would give stink eye to people who don't wear a mask, right? And now, are the people who are wearing masks, are they the ones who are gonna receive the stink eye from others? Because what I thought about on the day of this announcement was, what was the actual rate in Hawaii? According to the Department of Health's website, as of May 25th, 2021, Hawaii's population was approximately 49%, with another 8% who had received the initial. And while that's a lot of people, it got me thinking, well, what about the other 50% who weren't? You know, like what were they thinking after this announcement was made? I mean, were they feeling worried, anxious, sad, happy? I mean, I don't know what they were feeling, but it must have been a lot of mixed emotions. And this further got me thinking about Hawaii's population, right? Not just the population that, you know, got that, but just the general population at any given time in Hawaii. And it's actually a pretty transient population. I think for most states, they have a pretty stable population, right? Like the people who live there are the ones who live there. Granted, there are some tourist destinations that see like a big flux of visitors. But the thing about Hawaii is that with the population being relatively small at about 1.4-ish million, depends on what the census says with the newest census, but it's about 1.4, 1.5 million people in Hawaii. We see a big flux of tourists come in, and normally at any given time, the population might be a pretty good percentage of tourists. And with tourism starting to pick up, that percentage is gonna get higher. According to the Hawaii Tourism Authority, in the month of March, on any given day, there were 137,000 visitors in the state. That's a lot of people. Again, when you consider that the state has 1.4 million people, 10% on top of that are just visitors. That's a lot. That's quite a bit. And the thing is, with this constant flow of visitors in and out of Hawaii, you don't know their health background. You don't know who's been and who hasn't. You don't know who's been sick or who hasn't been sick. And when you have this constant flow in and out of a population, I think it can bring some people to worry. And it's just been incredible, the tourist numbers this summer. I mean, summer hasn't even started really, but the numbers have increased so much, especially on the island of Maui. And I can't imagine how those locals are having to deal with that. It must just be frustrating. Good for business, but frustrating for how life is on that island. And I can just say for the island of Oahu, it's been a noticeable increase. I mean, if you just go to Waikiki, it's almost like how it used to be, minus all the Japanese visitors, of course, but it's quite crowded. And I suspect that the numbers are just going to increase even more, like very sharply, all through the end of summer. And then of course, when the Japanese visitors arrive and they're allowed to come back and that process is all smooth for them, I'm sure it's going to be back to where it was by the at least beginning of 2022. That's just my guess, don't quote me on that, but seeing as how the rates are increasing so high, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get to that point. So like I said, I haven't decided whether I'm going to continue to wear a mask outside. I really have been enjoying not wearing a mask. I mean, it's nice, you know, to feel my cheeks and not have to breathe in that fabric. It is nice. But at the same time, I have a son to think about. You know, I think about him. Obviously, he can't get, you know, he's really young. And so in this case, I'm gonna steal a line from politicians, and I'm gonna say that I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic. I'm very curious how Memorial Day weekend went, and with the crowds that I've seen through pictures, it must have been pretty fun for some people. And so we're gonna see how that affected the cases in Hawaii, if it's actually gone up, or is it gonna go back down, or just stay the same. But now if I see people who don't wear masks, I think, hey, that's great, good for you, and I actually might join you in a week or two. And so at the very least, I hope that in this video I communicated that I think we should respect other people's decisions, especially now that the mask mandate has been removed in Hawaii, at least for outdoors. So stay safe, thanks for watching, and aloha.